Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Will Rowley, and I'm joined with my colleague Chris McWhirr, who's our partner manager at Cloud Direct. And we're going to be spending some time today talking about disaster recovery, particularly a product that we've got that's ideal for channel partners. I'll hand over to Chris, who's going to run through the other series of webinars that we've been running.
Yeah, so hello. So this is the third in our series of webinars aimed at our channel partners. The first on VoIP telephony and the second on data backup and how to maximise your revenues through that. So if you do want to get access to those recordings, just let us know and we can send you the details for that. So this one's going to be on disaster recovery, which we'll go over in a minute. And then finally we've got one coming up on hosted environments. So talking about hosted servers, hosted desktops. Is that right, Will?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, big growth sector for us at the moment, so do keep your eyes peeled for that invite.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about disaster recovery. So that is solutions that really allow businesses to operate effectively in disaster. So it's addressing business continuity, it's trying to minimise the amount of downtime that companies experience, and that's really the focus for today. In terms of why DR, there's quite a high demand for DR products at the moment. I mean, we've certainly found that the momentum's really picked up in the last 5 or 10 years, especially with the small to medium businesses. About sort of 10 years ago, we were getting inquiries mainly from the kind of larger end of the market. A lot of big businesses who disaster recovery is a critical part of what they do. Meanwhile, the smaller businesses were still sort of focusing on online data backup and replacing those tape solutions. Now most small companies have got a good backup solution in place and are really trying to start addressing the DR needs. And it's really something which I suppose more customers are aware of downtime. They're aware of the costs of downtime, and this is what they're trying to minimise. And as well as the financial impact of disasters as well, there's also the impact on reputation as well. So that's really why companies have started to look at this.
Yeah, I'd add to that, a lot of the SMEs typically have been less reliant on their technology up until fairly recently, and now technology underpins pretty much everything. And whether you're an SME or whether you're a large enterprise, the fact that you've got downtime is really not, it just can't be factored in. It's so important to be able to minimise that. And whereas it's only been the privilege of the larger corporates to have proper full-on disaster recovery solutions, the SMEs now really want to get a bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. There are more solutions out there which can address the needs of a smaller business. But it does create problems in the market as well, and partly because of the high demand for disaster recovery solutions, particularly with the SMBs. A lot of small companies like the idea of disaster recovery, but don't necessarily want to pay for it. So in response to this, you've had a lot of very low-end solutions coming onto the market, some very cheap products, and they're being brought by companies because they might be viewed as a better DR strategy than they've got at the moment, and that's fine for some customers. But for customers that are out there seriously looking for a decent disaster recovery solution that's going to be effective, it confuses it slightly, and there's more to look at in the market. And also a lot of confusion between backup solutions and disaster recovery solutions as well.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people, everyone uses backup. Backup's a much older technology. Certainly, distributed as a service, it's been around for a lot longer. But people are usually trying to shoehorn a backup solution into being their disaster recovery plan, and the two really don't play well together. I'm just going to run through a little bit about what we determine as backup and disaster recovery. So backup, and we've been doing it for 10 years, online backup, it's really the high frequency events, or relatively high frequency events, individual file loss, database corruption. There's a relatively low impact on your business. It's inconvenient, certainly, but it's not going to be disastrous to the business if you're without a certain file for a day or so. Now, that means that it's essentially a lower cost, and although you've got backups off-site, and people have been doing that for long enough now, it's not really a disaster recovery solution. That's really where we're looking at low-frequency events, the big impact stuff, the flood, fire, and theft things that are really going to drive a company out of business if they haven't got a decent solution for it.
And it is, it's really important. It may sound obvious, but to really understand the differences between those two solutions. I've certainly spoken to customers in the past who have. They've implemented a disaster recovery solution, maybe sort of something that live mirrors their data to a different location, something like Double Take. And it's a fantastic solution for them because they've got data that's really available in two locations at any one time. but then they've experienced something like a file corruption, and of course what DR doesn't do necessarily is cover them against that, because unless you're keeping multiple versions of a copy, something which a data backup solution will do, then if you get a corrupt file, that's just going to mirror that corruption over to the second location. You'll have two versions of corrupt data. So it's really important to understand the difference in backup and DR and make sure that you've got both implemented.
Absolutely. That kind of leads quite nicely onto the next slide in the deck, which is talking about what one of the two main acronyms that we find in DR and backup, which is your RTO and your RPO. So disaster recovery really is there to address your recovery time objective. How long are you willing to, or is your customer willing to be down and not using their systems, and what value can they attribute that time to? The recovery point, by the flip side, is how far before the disaster do they need to be able to restore to? So look at a backup solution, for instance. The RTO is probably with 24 hours to be able to get a file back or to recover a database is not unreasonable. The recovery point, however, you might be audited, or a customer might be audited where they need to be able to go back 7 years for that. Thinking about disaster recovery on the flip side, the recovery time has to be as short as possible. It's about almost as close to instantaneous failover as you can get. The recovery point can probably slip a bit, can probably slip within 24 hours. But as long as those systems are up and running, you've got a useful service. If we come on to look at kind of the main requirements of a DR solution itself then, number one, get working again or get your customer working again as effectively as soon as possible after invocation. It needs to be a simple process. It needs to be something that multiple stakeholders in the business can invoke, and it needs to not be reliant on skilled IT expertise. That's not to say there isn't a place for you as partners to be able to add value there, but it needs to be a relatively simple process. And fundamentally, if you're paying for a service, you need to be absolutely certain that it's going to work first time, every time.
I think as well, just picking up on the first point, when you're talking about get the systems working again effectively, I think customers really need to address what this means to them. What is working effectively in a disaster situation going to mean? Do you want all of your staff to be up and running, the whole business to be operational as it is on a normal day-to-day basis? Or are you going to be looking at working with limited staff, like who can get to home and when can they work? So these kind of things really need to be established by the customer before they can look at addressing these.
That's a really good point, Chris, actually. Thinking about the wider business continuity planning and planning for circumstances and a range of circumstances, whether it's an extended power outage, a broadband outage, a loss of site, a loss of a single server, all of these things need to be thought of in a bigger business continuity planning sense, because then you really are determining what level of disaster recovery you need, what level of backup you need, what can be achieved with backup that doesn't have to be on disaster recovery. So all things to think about, and real good value add for partners out there is to be able to approach a customer and provide this kind of consultation when they're looking at business continuity.
Yeah.
So moving on, we're just going to have a quick look at what we think our disaster recovery platform provides. The words are up there on the screen, but it's simply the best you can get at an affordable price point. Chris talked a little bit earlier about big corporates who's really been using disaster recovery solutions and expensive licensed softwares that do phenomenally well with multi-site environments where they've got dedicated lease lines between them. But for the SME, who just need to make sure they've got their 3 or 4 servers available at a flick of a switch, we really do believe this is the best you can get at that kind of price point.
Yeah, I think as well that kind of statement is a good example of of what a typical customer that comes to us, what they look for. Because I think it does need to be affordable. Okay, so it needs to be within budget, especially if you're speaking to a small to medium business. But then once you've understood those budgets, you really want to get the best solution you can get. If you've got clients on the other hand who are just thinking, right, we want a DR solution, let's go and get the cheapest one there in the market. They're going to be able to find something which is very cheap, but they're going to come across something which probably isn't reliable and doesn't fit with their requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. So just looking at what we actually provide. So it's a near instant recovery of critical Windows servers. So these will be things like your Active Directory, your SQL servers, your Exchange servers, your remote desktop servers. Recovery, we say, is complete, and by complete we mean working systems in a working network. All the IP addressing is as it is on in the physical environment. It's complete. It's managed and automated. That is to say that every day we take a snapshot of those servers. Every day we test boot them. as an automatic system kicks in and does that, and we know that we've got working systems available at a flick of a switch. And number 4, we test it every single day. We test it, and we have a solid, very, very solid guarantee that underpins that. And only because of the thoroughness of the testing and the frequency that we're doing it, can we offer a guarantee.
Yeah, and just to pick up on those last 2 points you made there, Will, because there's so many solutions out there at the moment which don't offer any guarantees and that don't really test the solution properly. And there's a lot of products which will just look to copy data across at the time of DR. And if you're doing that, there's so many bits of the process that can fail. Changing files from physical to virtual, changing your OS drivers, changing application settings. All of these things can go wrong, and they're not the kind of things that you want to be leaving to the point of disaster to be trying.
Absolutely. Just to go on to the actual wording of what we put in our SLA. If we can't deliver working systems within twice the number of minutes they usually take to become available, that's your systems as in that normal nightly boot phase, typically around 10 minutes per server, then we will refund the last 12 months of service fees. It's never a guarantee that we've had to pay out on because it's always worked. And as Chris says, there's nothing really else in the marketplace that puts a strong SLA down like this. Others will suggest that they can get engineers working on systems within X number of minutes or hours. They will provide new physical pieces of hardware to be able to start recovering to within X length of time. What we're offering is something a little bit different, and it is working systems as they were on the previous evening snapshot, available within a set number of minutes, and that's all worked out in advance as part of our onboarding process. But it's a very, very strong guarantee, and as a partner, that's a lovely guarantee for you to be able to have total confidence in the supplier that you're using. There's no pressure upon yourselves to get things working. It's all down to us, and you can actually deal with the disaster in hand rather than having to worry about getting people up and running and getting systems online. So how does it work? We'll give a very brief overview of this. So effectively what we'll do is we'll put an appliance into a client site. It's a fully managed piece of kit. It's on next day replacement if anything went wrong with it, and that's responsible for snapshotting all of the Windows servers that are in that environment that you want protecting on the disaster recovery plan. In the first instance, we'll put that onto a USB drive and ship it to our data centers, and then every single subsequent snapshot is sent compressed and encrypted over the internet to our data centers. We do an update of the previous evening snapshot with the new data, so we're taking the changes that have occurred during the business day. We're converting it into an image that will run, whether that's virtual to virtual or physical to virtual. We do some other things in terms of Microsoft licensing to make sure we always remain compliant with Microsoft SPLR licensing. And once we're happy that it's been updated, we'll then test boot the entire environment. So that could be a number of servers, all interdependent, and we'll test the order in which they boot, that they all come up as expected. And only once we're happy with all of that test phase, do we replace the previous working version, which would be from the previous evening. So in the morning you've got good snapshots, good copies of those servers ready to go should anything happen that day. So, looking at the invocation process, this is probably where you'd most likely get involved with your clients. So we need an authorized telephone call. Because we're bringing online their systems with their data, their databases, we only take authorized invocations from a number of predetermined disaster recovery contacts. Those rescue images are then started to boot just as they would the previous evening. There's no dependence on engineers to get things working, to rebuild physical machines. Everything is then connected to via the internet, so any way you can get an internet connection, you can get onto those servers, either directly on a SSL VPN connection, or through IPsec VPN for clients, or as most of our clients use kind of remote desktop services to do that.
Yeah, just to pick up on the first one you're saying about the authorized telephone call. So a lot of the partners I work with, typically what they'll do is have one of those authorized contacts within the company themselves, and then the actual IT partner can act as the second authorized person. So if you're not around, your client's always going to be able to fail over the solution. But as Will sort of talked about, there's nothing you really need to do. I mean, we offer the 24/7 support if needs be. And so if you're not around, the customer's going to be able to very easily get those systems failed over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fundamental thing here is if your customer calls you at 2 o'clock in the morning and they've had a fire and they need their systems online, it's not on your head to make that happen. You're not under the cosh, as it were, to get those systems online. All you're really needing to do is get people connected to our remote recovery platform, either via a VPN from their router on site or from say IPsec VPNs if they're working from home or from remote offices. So. The one other thing we want to just touch on is, obviously we've been talking about our DR solution. It is a nightly snapshot. So we take a copy of those servers as they are at roughly about 10 p.m. and ship them off-site, do all that testing and building phase overnight, and then by usually by early hours of the morning they're ready to go again. Now what that means is that if you had a disaster at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, potentially you're going to roll back to a set of servers that as they were looking at 10 p.m. the previous night. So there's a restore point objective there of up to 24 hours depending when you invoke the solution. We can improve on that. So we sacrifice some of the time it takes to get that environment ready, but we can use our backup solution, which backs up every 15 minutes, to be able to roll forward to within 15 minutes of the disaster. So you'll sacrifice some restore time, but improve radically the recovery point objective. Now, it's a great conversation to have with your customer to find out how long are they would they accept to be down, and if so, if they can take let's say a couple of hours of downtime while you're doing the backup, needing the restore from the backup solution, in favour of getting a closer restore point. It's a nice value add, and it's another set of services which obviously we can vent to you.
So just then looking at how to go about selling this solution into your customer base, looking at target markets, as a solution, it's not it's not dependent on a particular vertical market. Although we do see certain types of customers we do particularly well with, and that's really the customers who understand the financial impact of downtime. So Will, I mean, who do we work with? Manufacturing companies?
Manufacturing, logistics, a lot of sales-based companies like recruitment. Yeah. If they can see that let's say their CRM database is offline, and they've got guys who aren't making calls, who aren't doing business, there's a real visible value that they're not, revenue loss there associated with it.
Yeah, and we have financial companies again. We do pretty successfully with a lot of hedge funds we have on board using it. Again, it's really just the main thing I would say is it needs to be a company who disaster recovery is a necessity for them. As I mentioned before, any company, it's great to be able to fail over to live servers that you've got sitting there in the background. Any company would want that. But to be really serious about it, and the customers you should be sort of spending time, on sort of looking at this solution with, are really the ones that understand that, that they need that disaster recovery solution in place. Looking at different ways of actually going about doing that, one of the most, popular ways we recommend is to actually look at doing a full business continuity review. And that is something we've mentioned in previous webinars. We've got links that you can just ask me for, so you can get a free business continuity template that we put together. And it's a really powerful sales tool, a really good way of going in and talking about this solution. Because if you're just going in really without understanding the needs properly, and you're just going in and talking about just trying to sell them benefits of this disaster recovery solution straight away, it's going to be difficult for the customer to really relate to that. With a business continuity review, you can go in and you really need to get them thinking about what they would need to do in a disaster recovery situation. So, would they have to send people home? How many people would they send home? What systems would they need to have in place? And it's these kind of things that really get the customer thinking about a disaster recovery situation. It enables you to really qualify the needs, and then enables you to sort of position the product correctly afterwards.
One of the things I'd just add to that, if you're in a position where you can be consultative with your client, and you're talking about disaster recovery, it gives you really good insight into their systems. Maybe they're a new client, maybe there's somebody who you haven't had an awful lot of exposure with. You can really peel back the layers of their infrastructure. You can identify other prospects for other products that you might sell, archiving solutions, so you can move some of that data off-site in the first instance. So it's a really good way of being able to get in with the client, understand a bit more about their infrastructure, understand the DR requirements essentially, but also find opportunities where you can, as a partner, add value with other product ranges.
Yeah, so it's a good point. It's not just customers, prospects as well. Again, this kind of thing would be very useful for. So again, looking at when you're qualifying for the opportunity, it is really important with disaster recovery to actually understand what the customer needs and specifically what they need in a disaster recovery situation. We can provide sort of customized pricing for anybody who wants it afterwards if there's any requirements you're looking at. But the pricing does vary depending on a number of different technical elements. Will, you're probably in a good position to...
So effectively, because we're running up virtual servers, what we like to look at is the amount of kind of CPU, RAM, and disk space that your customer's using at the moment, how much they could get away with if they had to invoke in disaster recovery. Some applications are hungrier than others. Others we can scale back, and we'll take that. We'll talk to you and your customer about how we can best tailor a solution that meets their pocket size, but also gives them the amount of resource and power they need in those servers in disaster recovery. It could well be that, if you're looking at DR on a site that's normally running 100 people, but the business continuity planning says that we'll run on skeleton stuff of 20, then we can scale back the amount of work those servers are doing, and therefore, meet a price point that's going to match with the customer.
Yeah, and it's good that the solution we offer can do that. I know that I've heard a lot that don't, but when you first speak to customers and you say, right, how much data do you want to protect, they might tell you they've got 2 terabytes of data. A lot of that might be archive data sitting on a file server that realistically, in a DR situation, when they're just trying to keep the business running, that they're not going to need to access those files.
It's also just comes back to the difference between backup and DR. By all means, have everything backed up, but don't necessarily have it all on a DR platform. It's not the stuff that the guys are going to be needing within the first 2, 3, 4 hours of a disaster happening. So address different requirements with different solutions, fundamentally.
Okay, so looking at how to, once you've qualified those needs and you understand really what the customer wants, it's really a case of then positioning those benefits. And the first thing you want to make sure you do is obviously relate that back to the business continuity plan that you did. Talk to them about how they're going to be able to make cost savings and what the actual benefits are going to be to them with regards to that, not just the benefits of the product, but obviously what it's going to mean to them, financially, and again, with regards to the reputation of the company as well. Also, reliability is just a really big, one of the main unique selling points that we've got with this product. Will talked about the guarantee and the fact that, all the servers are tested. And that genuinely is something that you won't see out there with many other sort of products on the market, apart from the sort of the very expensive ones. And that's really, ultimately, for a disaster recovery solution, your customer needs to know they've got something that when everything goes wrong, they can guarantee they're going to be up and running, not just something that they're sort of fingers crossed and hoping a prayer that it will actually work.
I actually really like the reliability point. Is selling this myself, I like this product a lot because I know that we've never been in a position where we can't realistically think of ourselves in a position where it doesn't work. It just does. And from a customer's point of view, and thinking about the lower bit there, the evaluation, they see the product working before, within the first 30 days of the contract, we have it up and running. It's tested on their servers. They can build that into their kind of BC planning as well. They see it with their own data on their own servers. It's really demonstrable, and it's a great sales technique. So even if you're signing up with a 30-day clause on it, we don't ever have anyone back away from that evaluation because it's such a powerful sales driver to say, well, here you go. Here's my disaster recovery solution working. And we have people who use it, use that kind of invocation by pre-arrangement for things like annual auditing. So if you've got a requirement or your customer's got a requirement to be audited and prove their DR solution works, it's done at a flick of a switch. I was in a client a few weeks ago, and they spent a week with 5 IT guys testing their BC planning, rebuilding from tape backup onto physical hardware. It was a week's worth of IT manpower dedicated to proving to an audit that they've got a BC plan. This is done by prior arrangement. It's much, much easier. And one of the final nice factor about the fact we can run this up at any time is that people tend to start using it for things like sandboxing. So they might have a major application upgrade going through. They want to test it on their own server with their own data. We can give them their server, as it was the previous evening, to go and do that application upgrade, see if there's any hiccups, and before it touches the production environment, bottom up the process for going through that patching and things. So there are wider applications than just disaster recovery, but fundamentally, the fact that it's demonstrable and it can be shown to work before anyone even has to sign on the dotted line is a really good sales tool.
Absolutely, it is a really powerful sales tool, and I think as well as obviously showing them the solution works, again, it just gets your customer to actually really think about a disaster recovery situation and try and actually, address it. Because if it's just something they put down on paper or something they just thought about, it's really hard to, to be able to justify, the cost of this product to them. They really need to be involved in it, and that's why the evaluation is such a good thing for. And again, you mentioned about the testing as well. This product is really easy to test. You can do regular tests, of the solution periodically, so it really gives customers confidence that what they paid for it, is going to do the job.
Yeah, it's not a sign up and hope that it's going to work when you need it. It can be tested and is very demonstrable.
Exactly. Okay, so that's really an overview of the product then, and how it works. Obviously, if you've got any other questions, you can ask us afterwards. Quickly looking at the partner schemes that we offer, so we've got a couple of different options for you coming on board as a partner. The entry-level partner scheme we have is our certified partner scheme. That's really for customers, for partners who want to start offering our services, but really still want to keep a focus on their core products and their core offerings. So we can sign up accounts on a case-by-case basis. There's no commitment that needs to be made. Billing can either be direct with to your customer, and we can pay you a commission, or we can bill you for the service at a discount. So it's completely up to you as to how you want to proceed with that. The other one we offer is a wholesale partner scheme, and that's really designed for partners who want to resell our services, but as part of their core offerings. So you have full access to all the management portals, acting as first-line support. And there are commitments that are then involved for which you receive increased discounts for. Again, we can provide more information on those afterwards.
So just, Chris just mentioned the wholesale scheme at the moment. Obviously, we are Cloud Direct, we're a crowd services brokerage. And for those of you who don't know us, we do vend a whole range of different cloud-based technologies, whether that be things like instant messaging, telephony, hosted desktop, disaster recovery we've been talking about today, all underpinned by connectivity. We also sell lease lines and business broadband. Fundamentally, and Chris mentioned about the wholesale scheme there, if you bought into that, then obviously you get access to our entire portfolio. We're not expecting you to go and sell X amount of DR. You can pick and choose from any of our product suites. We also pride ourselves on good service, much like anybody else out there will bang on about service, but we do really back it up with really good figures with our Net Promoter Score. If you're not aware of what that metric is, do look it up. It's a very, very strict and harsh measure of how good we do. And a whole load of certificates and charter marks that we work to, so things like ITIL, Prince2, we're a G-Cloud accredited, things that just back up the fact that we are fundamentally a service-based company. And not forgetting security. Cloud is still viewed by a lot of the marketplaces being unsafe or not as trustworthy as having stuff on site. We look at ourselves under a microscope with an audit to ISO 27001. We make sure all of our suppliers also comply to those same accreditations, and ISO 20000 for IT services management. So you know that you're dealing with an outfit that takes seriously the security of their customers' data, and also the way in which we work, and we work to and we process. We work to very, very stringent processes to ensure we adhere to those charter marks. So a little bit about Cloud Direct. So that's it for our Disaster Recovery for Channel Partners webinar. We have recorded this, so we're putting it out. If you've missed it and you wanted to catch up, just drop us an email. There's partners@clouddirect.net. Chris monitors that one day and night. Alternatively, give us a call on the 0800 number there if you've got any questions or you've got any requirements that you think might be interesting to talk about for disaster recovery. Thanks very much for your time again this afternoon. I understand we're all very busy, so we'll let you go. If you do have any questions, please do get in touch with us on the numbers there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.